Welcome to Community Nation and welcome back to the Cabinet. I guess today we're going to talk about an issue that's been pervasive in our culture and in our community, and something that everyone, a lot of times it's too taboo to talk about in the workplace, in the place that it's happening, but it's also something that we don't like to talk about with each other just because we don't know what the ramifications are behind it. And I'm really referring to mistreatment in the workplace. And we talk about so many different things in the culture. We talk about sexual harassment and abuse in the workplace. And it's come to the forefront a lot with the Me Too movement and the way that people have responded to different issues. I'm bringing the Cabinet together today to talk about how it affects us in different ways and in places that you may not even know that it exists. So joining me on the Cabinet today is Xander, Hannah, and Harsh. All three of you, welcome to Unmuted Nation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining. So obviously I kind of led in with what we're discussing today. And my first question is if you've ever received, and this, I guess, mistreatment in the workplace can happen both from your direct supervisor, from your boss, or from your other coworkers. Have any of you ever received mistreatment in the workplace? Xander, I'll start with you.
Okay, it's actually funny you mention it. I haven't received any mistreatment in terms of sexual mistreatment or anything like that, but I recently got off the set of a student production. I ended up quitting before the production actually started just because I got so much negative response from the director. So it was just it's kind of funny you mentioned because I feel like I kind of just came out of one.
Wow, so you were in a situation where there was some mistreatment happening or things kind of underhandedly, and recently?
Yeah, there was a few of the people working on the film with me. We were just really unhappy with how the director treated us and the rest of the crew. So yeah, we ended up just sending in a notice yesterday to her stating our case and why
wow,
we didn't really want
to. Were you able to communicate with the person that did the mistreatment directly, or did you send it to someone that they report to?
No, we were able to send it directly. We're a smaller team, so it was we were meant to be more closely tied, but it kind of just didn't end up being that way. So, but we were able to directly message the person.
Okay, hold that thought, because I'm going to ask you a little bit about how it made you feel, but we'll come back to that in a second. Harsh, have you ever experienced any mistreatment in the workplace?
I haven't experienced anything because the only places I've worked at, the only companies were at internship places. Sometimes, and they were all at music studios. Sometimes people can go really hard on you, but I don't think I have experienced any kind of verbal or physical mistreatment. But yes, I think when employees receive mistreatment in workplaces, even if they decide to quit that particular company, they are still uncertain about the assurance they're going to get from other companies they join. So I think it's really important that we treat our employees well so that irrespective of whether they stay with you or go somewhere else, they're given that assurance that, we care for you.
Agreed. Sometimes I think it is very easy to feel like there's going to be some retaliation or ramifications when you go elsewhere and you may not even get a good recommendation. Hannah, last but certainly not least, have you ever received any type of mistreatment in the workplace?
Not directly from a supervisor or coworker, but it's interesting when you have a job that includes speaking on the phone to clients, and it's very obvious, or it's very implied what your gender is from, in that kind of environment, where you're talking on the phone, the client can usually tell if you're male or female almost instantly. And there's definitely can be a difference in how you're treated by those you're talking to through that form of communication. I feel like I had a lot of clients that would not take me very seriously because they thought that I would be much easier to manipulate due to I was very young and female, and I feel like it set me back a little bit in getting credibility from those I was talking to, not face to face.
Wow. And that's something I don't think we even think about or talk about a lot, is even the way that people treat people when they work at certain places because of assumptions that they make and things that they do or how they may prejudge the situation. Xander, I want to come back to you for a second. When you were recently on this set, and I'm glad that you mentioned kind of the type of workplace, because people assume that this only happens in certain types of environments, or that it can only happen in an office space, or it can only happen when there's you're working directly with an executive type. Describe for me like how you felt when things were just a little bit off.
Okay, yeah. I ended up working for like a smaller production, and it was strange because I know a lot of people on the production, so I would even count like a lot of friends. So it feels really strange to kind of like convert into that professional environment and just see how like people change and will how treat you differently, like even on a set compared to like how they would in like every day, because it the person who like I was working for and was like a really close friend, and she just ended up being so like toxic and negative towards a lot of us on the crew. So it's kind of just interesting to see like the comparisons to how people are like outside of the workplace rather than like inside. And I think for me, I put up with a lot of the stuff that she told me and like my other cast members for so long, because I did consider her to be like like a friend or like someone I felt closer with than just like a boss. So it kind of felt like in that sense that my relationship with her outside of the workplace would be affected too if I spoke up within the workplace. And in so doing so, like I kind of ended up silencing myself for like a really long time.
Yikes. So I think that's something that happens regularly, that people silence themselves and they're not 100% sure on how to approach those situations, which brings me to my next question, which is really, do you feel like there's space for you to adequately address mistreatment? And for Harsh, for example, not you directly, and Hannah, you by customers, did you ever feel like you could adequately, without any type of judgment or criticism, voice your concerns about the mistreatment? Hannah?
I'm not sure.
You,
I think
I mean, and I don't know the environment specifically, but I just imagine sometimes it's a little difficult to have the conversations without the response being that's your job. The job is for you to just deal with it. And there's sometimes a lack of understanding from management. That's really why I was asking.
so. The job that I worked for specifically was a law firm, and I was an intern, but I was sometimes required to speak with clients directly. And I think the lawyer that I worked for wanted me to gain some experience in the field and get comfortable talking to people, but at the same time, there's sort of a imbalance that someone like a rich male, a decent looking man lawyer would not pick up on, is the just difference in treatment, because a lot of the people I spoke to thought I was his secretary. And
Sure. I think that's a real issue. I think there's a natural bias that people have, and you enter situations not being aware of how other people may be treated in the same environment, especially if they don't have the same genetic makeup that you do, or the same type of a position of influence. And so I will definitely say that sometimes, especially leaders and people that are managing positions, kind of overlook that. Xander, did you feel like, obviously you guys wrote a letter, so did you feel like you have do you think your critique is going to be well received?
Um, I'm honestly not that sure. I would say that was pretty difficult to actually like get it out there, like that information. But I think having the support of like other team members around me, like feeling similar ways, and like them aiding in like the letters and just like supporting helped me like it helped me speak out. So even if it's not something that will be like well received by my like boss technically, I think that it was in the long run better for me to put it out there and just like get out how I feel rather than just like sitting back and worrying that I'll gain some sort of repercussions because I do speak out. Like I should have enough self-respect for myself and like the people around me where I should not care if it is like negatively received.
Got it. That makes complete sense to me. I have no doubt that makes sense. I want to switch gears for a little bit and talk about the upcoming election and just general thoughts on it. You can share who you're voting for and why if you want to. No pressure there, but I do want to kind of talk about the candidates that are on the table and the response that you're seeing, because I think we all live in silos, and sometimes our viewpoints coincide. Sometimes they're opposite of our friends and our family, right? And then sometimes they are just the same. We are in company with people that agree with a lot of the things that we do and a lot of the things that we say. With this upcoming election being less than 100 days away, first of all, have you made up your minds who you've decided to vote for? A head nod will do.
Yeah.
Okay. And one thing I want to ask is, because sometimes people are really into just one issues, but I think there's usually a primary issue. Without telling me who you're voting for, tell me one thing that's important to you in a president, or one thing that you'd like to see, and that it's going to be important to you in the decision that you make for the next president. Hannah, we'll start with you.
Well, specifically, I would say I'm a first-time voter, so I feel a little like frazzled by trying to vote and choose a candidate, but I would say that it's just important to see consistency in a candidate, which is nearly impossible, I would say, in this time, but it's just important to understand who you're voting for. In
Totally
terms of
understand
issues,
that, and that's actually something to consider. Something I guess I should have asked. Being a first time voter specifically, do you think that are you pleased with your options?
I mean, no. I would say that this time around, you know, I feel like in any election, you're kind of just, you have two candidates and neither of them are going to be super ideal.
Yep.
But
You're right. You're right. And I think I was sharing with someone else earlier this week that for 43 presidents, they all look the same. It was all the same, almost the same makeup. Different party affiliations, different backgrounds, different like vocal views, but for the most part, it was all the same. It only changed one time. So I think for people that are first-time voters, kind of seeing that what the option has been during your lifetime, even though for most of the people that has never been the option, you already believe that there should just be options and some variety there. Harsh, how are you feeling about this upcoming election?
So first off, I'm not an American citizen. I'm an international student. So, I mean, like Hannah said, if I had to look at hypothetically, if I were to become a citizen, uh, like she said, I would look for consistency in a candidate, like over the 4 years. And also being an alien in this country, I would like to see like a president who would like incorporate a lot of inclusivity, so that students coming into the country feel safe and they know that, all right, we're here for you, you belong here, and like we shouldn't be felt left out. So yeah, I mean, I can't vote for anyone right now, but I mean, I have candidates in my mind that I'm hoping they win the election. So yeah.
No, right, and this is me. I feel terrible because I'm making all types of assumptions today, and it's Friday. Give me some grace. With you not being an American citizen, what does all of these antics surrounding the election? What does it look like to you?
I mean, all right, with President 45, I think he's just trying to do what he did the last time, spin stuff off right before the elections to like try and like pull something off and again, like win like he did in 2016. But otherwise, I mean, I'm not keeping a close tab on what's going on. But I mean, everything's like haywire right now with everything going on, and Kanye coming in, and that guy. I mean, I don't know.
I mean,
He's
I think
like,
it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot, and I think I guess I was a little curious on what it looks like from the outside,
mhm,
or someone that is not a citizen here but is actually here, and you kind of see
yeah.
the antics and the options, and it can seem like a bunch of chaos. Xander, when you look at your options, how are you feeling about the upcoming election?
Um, I mean, not the greatest in terms of choices. I feel like out of this election specifically, really early on, it felt like I automatically had to choose between like two candidates. It was either between like our previous president, like our current president now, Trump, or like Joe Biden. It kind of felt like it was always that race. And I don't know, it doesn't feel the greatest to have those as my two choices, just since like in terms of all the Democratic presidents or Democratic candidates we've seen this year, it kind of feels like Biden's policies and his ideas are probably like the closest aligned to Trump in terms of like any other candidate compared to like Bernie or AOC or like Warren, who we saw, or like Kamala Harris. Like out of all of them, I feel like he's most closely aligned to Trump. So it's like after having the last 4 years which have been like kind of chaotic and it just like wanting a huge change from like what we've been in, it's kind of strange to feel like our two choices are just like not like fully aligned, but they're like the closest they could be compared to like everyone else that was on the
Compared to
schedule.
everyone else, is this going to be your
Yeah.
first election that you're able to vote in?
Yeah, it is going to be my first election voting.
So I have a question then, because I think, especially it being your first election and it being disappointing, I think a lot of times this is what people that have been voting, even if you voted more than once, you don't consider how many new people kind of come into the electorate. And so there's so many people, elderly people that are just not with us anymore that won't be voting, and new people that kind of have new views. And one point that I have not heard is that looking at the two of Trump and Biden, you feel like they are not really one and the same, but they're so much alike and not different at all. If I don't know if you talked about this with your friends at all, is this something that is being discussed? Like, do you guys talk about where we are as a country? And did you, especially this being your first election, did you ever imagine adulthood would be like this? Xander, I'll go back to you and I'll come back.
Okay, honestly, like, no. I mean, leading up to it, I feel like so many people have told like our generation, our new generation of voters, they're like, you're the ones that are going to have the voice and like truly like make this new difference in this upcoming election. And then we kind of got here as the first wave of voters, and it's like just because of how similar and different like these two candidates are, it's kind of like, okay, it kind of doesn't feel like I'm making that much change this time. And I mean, like, and I talk a lot about politics with my friends just because it's like vastly interesting, but a lot of close circle friends, but outside circle friends that I just talk to randomly, a lot of their excuses are like, not excuses, but what they say is like vote for Bernie vote for Biden because it's not a vote for Trump, and it's kind of just like choose this because you don't want to choose the other one, rather than me having like an actual choice between who I would want to be in office.
Yeah, it can definitely feel like a total setup.
Yeah, it kind of just like the lesser of two evils at this point. And it's like, okay.
It is, and a lot of people felt the same way when it was Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And hindsight is 20/20, because the facts pretty much anyone would agree probably maybe not supporters of the current president, but if Hillary Clinton was the president right now, our COVID-19 response would have been totally different. And she may have been a separate evil, but there's no way that things would have kind of run out of control. And that's just one example that I have. But I do think the expectations are often jaded when it's your first time. Hannah, are you and your friends talking about politics at all?
I feel like in college, it's very often a topic of conversation in most social circles. Lately, I feel like people have been avoiding it somewhat. And the most commonly brought up topic is the pandemic and how it has been handled. I would say that there's just a lot of tension around the subject, but I feel like it is being discussed a decent amount, especially like on a college campus in that setting where you're just around educators who are pushing those topics,
pushing their thoughts and their views exactly. And Harsh, what about you?
I mean, I try not to get deep into politics because I'm more into like looking up music and like trending sports and stuff like that. But yes, like Hannah said, in college it is brought up a lot, and yes, mostly about the pandemic. So me being from India, the situation over there has like just worsened like ever since it started. So I mean, people just talk about how it's been handled over here in the US, and the spike and decline in cases, and in India it's just getting worse and worse. And I mean, but in general I don't like stray deep into politics. I'm more of like an entertainment, and yeah, I just like you know uncovering new sports, music.
I totally get it, and I think it's the reason I asked is just because it's always interesting to me to find out how where the conversation starts. I was my first when I the first year that I could vote. I was like a year after an election had happened, so the first time I voted was actually for the President 44. That election, his first election, and I just wasn't able to. I missed it by like a month because of my birthday, and I wasn't able to vote in the election before that. And I think that coming into it, you are always a little jaded just because there's so much information. You may have grown up a certain way, and maybe your family votes a certain way, and there's an expectation there. And there's so many different things that kind of play into it. And I also don't think there's enough conversation about voting in other elections that actually are the ones that matter for where you live, that make the difference of the policies that you interact with. And I think that there's so much there, and I'm out of time, and I wish I could talk more. So I want to thank you guys for joining me for the cabinet today. Hopefully, if you're able, you'll come back and we can do this again. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
And welcome back to the cabinet. Joining me for this segment of the cabinet is Z from BossFM News. Z, how are you?
Hey, Alex. Good morning. Up bright and early on Friday.
Absolutely. And thanks for agreeing to join and talk to me a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about, in our first segment today, we were talking a little bit about equality and why there's such a fight for it, and why people are so resistant to it. It ranges in so many ways, and there's so many movements happening right now, not just Black Lives Matter, but just fights for equality in general. This week, and even in the last few weeks, we've seen something that a lot of us have not expected, just allegations that the workplace was very toxic and not equal for people that worked for Ellen DeGeneres. And like Ellen is like on camera is one of the most people that you see. Like she's just giving, and the fans, her fans undoubtedly are totally in love with her brand and what she offers. And so when we see inequality and a lot of times, understandably, people don't understand that inequality exists if they're not experiencing it. But I think sometimes there are underlying biases that happen, and then sometimes there are just people are boldly biased. We are seeing a time where people are boldly biased in a lot of ways that are unsettling. When you see or when you think about the equality struggle that we're in right now, why do you think or what do you think the reasoning behind it is?
Oof. So, Alex, bigger men than I have tried to answer questions like that. But
Absolutely.
it's a simple thing. Even as far as I live my life, I just follow one rule. It's treat people like you'd want to treat yourself. We're all human. And regarding the Ellen thing, I know exactly what you mean. I read up about it, and I also found it pretty bizarre because the whole basis of that Ellen show, it's aimed to a very liberal-leaning audience. You wouldn't expect the things that we heard about that show going on as it does. Uh, Maybe that could be equated to just work culture where it's just like work, 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 and maybe
Sure.
that was a result of it for the Ellen show at least. I couldn't tell you, but yeah, as you can see, like there's an uneven playing field across so many different industries. Forget media. I last night itself I saw a Bloomberg article which said the female workforce in finance has dropped by 20%. So it's a very difficult question, I think, to answer. I'm sure there are cultural
Well, it's
factors
really interesting to
going
hear
on.
that it's dropped by 20%.
Yeah,
20%
yeah.
in
Or
today's climate,
applicants,
and
applicants. Yeah,
it's insane. And I think that it's probably because people understand what they're going into, and that it's such a male-dominated area, such a male-dominated industry, and the fight for equality has been so long, especially for women. And so I think it's important to understand facts like that when you see this rampant inequality. And I like what you said, just treat people with respect. That's really the
yeah.
mentality that we should all have when we are interacting with other people. Where do you think that because now people disrespecting each other is rampant in our society right now?
Yeah, yeah,
Do you think that the current leadership has anything to do with that?
yeah. It's definitely a result of the times we live in, wherein political parties are definitely aiming to divide more than so. We're seeing this in a lot of countries. It's not only the US. I'm seeing this in Brazil, seeing this in India and Poland as well, where it's like, all right, you know what? Let's divide our base, and even if we 50 people who don't like us, we have 50 people who do, they'll vote for us. And unfortunately, the current political system does stand for stoking racial tension, stoking biases. And I
And it's
definitely think,
important to know what you said. It is happening everywhere. And I
yeah,
think,
yeah, yeah,
first and foremost, Americans are very self-absorbed and very self-centered. So they don't see anything but what happens in America. So a lot of Americans won't even realize that it's a political strategy that's being used in countries everywhere. Brazil right now, they have one of the most polarizing leaders that they've ever had in so many ways. He one-ups the current leader of the United States in
yeah,
many,
yeah.
many ways. So yeah, it's really interesting to see, but a lot of people aren't realizing, and do you? I mean, we see in history what this type of division has caused and what type of problems it's caused, not just for countries but for the world. Do you think, because in my last cabinet, I had a bunch, everybody voting in the upcoming election, this is going to be their first round at it, their first time, the first time that they were able to vote in the election, and they all stated that they thought it was going to be different. They thought that they would have some different options. And they also thought that they would be able to be a part of the change because they've been able to see how things have materialized and matriculated over their lifetimes. And now the first time they get to vote, I just was hearing in the last segment that people feel like the two candidates on the table, or at least one of them felt like the two candidates on the table are essentially the same. One's not as not as divisive, but
Yeah.
there's not much variety to choose from. If you, I don't know if you voted here before, when you see what's on the table, how do you feel about what America's offering to its citizens right now?
Yeah. I think we had this conversation back in 2016, and that's when I voted for the first time. And everyone was like, oh, Hillary Clinton isn't this and isn't this. But, I think it's all, you got to take everything in perspective. The current president the bar is so low that I think anything is better than that. And it's hard for people to get around it. I'm sure they want the idealization of like having Bernie Sanders or someone, but that's not the reality.
I think that there are so many things that are true in that statement. What people don't realize is that for 43 presidents, they all were the same. Essentially, they all look the same. It's only been different one time. And so when we realize that, I think that some of the change, and I've started to say this a lot this week, a lot of the change is not going to begin with just choosing the president, because we know what America has to offer. They've done it. It's offered the same thing 43 times. We've only seen the difference one time, but we need to start making differences in our local elections. If you're not voting for your city councilman, if you're not voting for your governor and your mayor, and even your congressmen and your senators, then you are essentially not really making any wide-scale effect, because these are the people that impact your everyday life and what happens and influence the legislation in the areas that you live in. And I don't think that there's been enough vocalizing of that to people. I don't think that we stress, you learn about the United States democratic system and how it works, and the two-party system, or multi-party, but really two-party system, and the different branches of the government. But I don't think people leave knowing that they need to be involved in these conversations and involved in these elections to sufficiently affect change, because essentially, until we change what it looks like in those areas, and I think just thinking of our Congress, right? We think about the House makeup, and AOC has been such a rigid figure as she has joined the House of Representatives, but it's really just because she looks different. She comes from a different place, and
she's a woman. So there's always those underlying things of that. Oh, if a man has authority, he's like assertive. But if a woman has authority, then it's like,
she's got a lot of power, and she has a lot of similar experiences of the current people that are voting, or should be voting. And so a lot of people her age don't pay attention to those elections, but now that she's there, they will. And I think that's part of the fear that is underlying in some of the abuse that she faces by even her colleagues. A member of the House of Representatives just called her a bitch last week, which is completely insane and unfounded. And in any other business, he would have been really, really reprimanded and censured for something like that.
Yeah. So it just shows that it just spread everywhere. When you talk about inequality in the workforce, America is just unwilling to embrace a female president. The culture just hasn't moved there yet. And the same thing for AOC. She's probably like poster child for millennial politics, but it's just because
absolutely. And I'm assuming and I'm hoping that in the next elections we start to see more of that, because I think as people use platforms to talk about the fact that politician is not, that job is not supposed to be a lifelong designation. It's supposed to be something that's chosen by the people. And if the people are choosing you over and over, that's one thing. But if the people are just ignoring the election and you're just staying by default, I think it's time to go. And I think we'll start to see that as people kind of dive into it. Before we run out of time, you're working on a new project here, Boss FM Digital News. Tell me a little bit about it.
Absolutely. We host a talk show from Monday to Friday, and we talk about culture, we talk about music, we talk about stuff in the celebrity world. And on Tuesdays, I have my own tech talk where I try and take a deep dive into some of tech's deeper problems in terms of AI, racial biases in AI, the mask crisis, where we're gonna see technology come into masks, and I try and make it interesting. So it's a good show, and you guys should check it out on YouTube and the BossFM app.
The BossFM app, absolutely. People will check that out. We'll put the information up on Unmuted Nation so people can do that and check that out as well. Z, thank you so much for coming through Unmuted Nation and
Always a
sharing
pleasure.
your thoughts with me. My hope is you'll come back and do it again.
Hey, for sure.
All right, absolutely.
All
All right, Unmuted Nation continues, and you know what it is. It's Friday. More discussion, more conversation, and your thoughts. The number, as always, 1-844-UNMUTED, Unmuted Nation on Twitter and Instagram. I'm going to take a quick break, and I'm back with you in 6 minutes right here on Unmuted Nation.